business owner stuck in fear, doubt, and worry about what the marketplace will look like in the future? Then this show is for you. Strap on your seatbelt and get ready to disrupt and innovate. Here's your host, Lisa Levy.
Hello and welcome to Disrupt and Innovate. I am so excited. Today, we're having our first actual interview. We spent the past several episodes listening to me talk about things that are disruptive and innovative in our world around us, but it's so much more interesting to have a conversation with somebody who is actually doing something disruptive, who is leading and thinking in a way that is different from what you or I might think is the norm, and that's a really good thing. Scott Smith is here with me today. He is the director of the Foundation for a Better Economy, an entrepreneur, author, and partner in the C-Squared Fund. He was an early pioneer in structured finance on Wall Street, originating the first mixed property commercial mortgage conduit and securing $1 billion line of credit from DLJ. He is the author of A Tale of Two Economies, a book that develops the basis for a congressional bill that would replace our income taxes with payment taxes. This would slash our tax rate to 0.2%. Yes, I said that correctly. Balance the budget and provide basic income, healthcare, and college for all U.S. citizens. All of these ideas are mind-blowing to me. Scott, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
I cannot wait to have this conversation, but I do not like to read biographies. I would really rather you share your story with our audience so that they can understand your journey and what brought you to what you're doing today.
A lot of it comes out of necessity. You know, life propels you along, always differently than you're thinking. So now, when somebody says, oh, you originated the first commercial mortgage-backed security, it sounds like, something you were destined to do, or you did some education and it all just kind of fell into place out of necessity. And I was a commercial lender. I had taught myself how to do that because I was a philosophy major and no one would hire me. And so I taught myself to broker commercial loans. And then we had the S&L crisis, probably way worse than the 2008 crisis was, And you had all of these borrowers had nowhere to go, foreclosures right and left. And it just hit me. I bet you we could pool all of these loans and get the investment banks on Wall Street to sell bonds off of it. I'd seen what Louis Ranieri had done. And so I tried to imitate it. But, I flew out there and everybody told me why it couldn't be done. It took about 3 years. 3 long years in which you're really lonely. Everybody's telling you it can't be done and you're beginning to wonder if you're crazy. And then it all comes together pretty quickly in the end. That's, I think, the nature of disruption, is that once it breaks through and there's acceptance, all the naysayers go away and suddenly everybody acts like, well, of course. And it's normal, like it's normal for us to fly in planes today. It's normal for us to use the internet, but at one point in time, that wasn't normal. It was far-fetched and outrageous.
It absolutely was. And as you were talking through that, right, the period of disruption you described was years in duration.
Right.
Right. But then in that moment, the innovation piece of it, right, then is like treated as, oh, well, that just happened miraculously.
Right.
It's hard work.
It's hard work, and all the conditions have to be right. In other words, let's say I'd gone out there in 87 and started promoting it. I started in 90 and the first loans were funded in 93. So if I'd started in 87, it probably wouldn't have happened until 93.
Right.
Because the conditions had to be right. In the conceiver's mind, it's so logical, it makes sense. But people don't do things because it's logical and makes sense. They do things more out of desperation and then a clear opportunity. And so the impact of that securitization was mortgage rates came down they've been up around 10%. We think they're high today. They were a lot higher back then. And it was securitization in its various flavors that allowed the efficiency in the markets to get to the level that interest rates could drop that low. And so you had homeownership available to tens of millions of people. If you look at it like a plan, like somebody conceived of all of this and how it comes together, it looks magnificent. But there was no like conductor orchestrating thinking, oh yeah, and then Rachel, it's just like you're doing what you have to do, comes together. I remember being asked by an it was a sea of investment bankers. I was speaking at a rating agency conference. There's 500 or so guys in pinstripe suits. I felt so intimidated, and somebody really challenged me and said, well, what's the total addressable market, And I said, well, it's, the size of real estate mortgages. And he goes, no, like dollar amount, like how many of these securities can go out there? And I said, well, 100 billion, and everyone laughed. Oh, it just was going through. It's like, there's the dreamer on the stage. Now, $30 trillion later, I was off by, factor of 30. It was way too small.
Yes.
I think we probably did 100 billion of them in the next 2 years or something. So, yeah.
I am fascinated that your area of actual study was philosophy. Mm-hmm. And your area of influence is, in the banking and taxation space. Mm-hmm. My mind, right? My right brain, left brain is like exploding with that because the creativity involved in the philosophy and bringing that dreamerness into the financial space, I think causes disruption.
Yeah. If I had a Harvard MBA, I wouldn't have ever thought of it or done it. That's for sure. Because I was given a list of about 10 or so key reasons it can't be done when I first started to promote it. And so if I had been educated so that I knew those reasons ahead of time, then I would never have gone there with the idea. I would have known better. And so I think what's important for people to realize is that there might have been 10 or 100 other people out there with other ideas in finance that might have been equally or more valid than that one. And it didn't work. And so it's not that they weren't bright enough or it wasn't the right idea. It just didn't come together. And you could have played my own path in many different ways where it never came together. Insofar as a man can see, it wasn't inevitable. Maybe in a grander scheme, on a spiritual level, it's not. I don't know. It wouldn't matter if it wasn't, because everybody who's pursuing something, when it fails, the failure is just as miserable for them. And so, that's the sobering part about life. Our world is not as good as it could be. That's clear. It's not anywhere.
Absolutely.
Could be if any number of other things have been accepted or done. But, I tend to be very optimistic. I look back, as a philosopher 100 years ago, certainly different than it is today. And 200 years ago, it was far worse. 300 years ago. So, it's like people dream about the good old days, but they weren't so good.
Well, and isn't it funny that our look on the good old days and then challenge what was actually so much better? It's hard to actually quantify it because
it is. I mean, I think back on when I was in college, because there was no internet, there were not even answering machines. There was FedEx, so you mailed stuff and it got there in a week. And I would say life seemed easier to me. I look back on it and I'm like, wow, we didn't have all these things pulling us in different directions. And yet on the other side of the coin, it's like, what would I get rid of today?
So with the mindset that you have that things could be and should be better than they are right now, one of the areas that you are investing a tremendous amount of your time and energy into is around the idea of how we do taxes in the United States.
Yeah, no, that's been a passion of mine. So, okay, I said that pool took 3 years to put together. Well, I've been working on this for 25 years. And again, the time has to be right. The data just didn't exist for the first 15 of the 25 years. So there wasn't going to be anything that would happen, and I guess maybe our country wasn't in enough pain, but I was driven to do it out of pain because I ran a small business. And I looked at my employees and I thought, I don't know how they make it. It's just got to be so tight for them. And it's not like I'm withholding anything from them. I can barely pay them, so I don't know how I'm making it, So
Right.
but I didn't see, and I thought, like from people's perspective, from an individual's perspective, whether they're an employer or an employee or self-employed, it's like what could we change with the stroke of pens, not new technology, that would make the biggest difference in my life? And I thought, got to be a different way to do taxes. And what will that lead to? And so, I was inspired because I was living in two worlds.
Mm-hmm.
Working on Wall Street, I'm creating financial assets, derivatives, and all this stuff. And I remember thinking, are these real? How big can this world get? And I saw the monetary economy was detached from the reality of the world, the material economy. So that's the goods and services that create our standard of living, right? And the money part was like meant to stoke it or move it along. That's its only purpose. No one eats a treasury bond.
No.
It's like try to go watch a derivative at night for entertainment. It's absurd. They're just abstract notions that can drive economic processes. And so I was always intrigued by one, if I felt like taxes didn't have to be as high as they are. And I wasn't of the notion that we need to cut spending back.
Right.
I just knew there was a whole different way. And the other piece would kind of drive me crazy is we talk about this deficit every year where we have this deficit. And so people would talk about it like we're spending more than we can afford. And I think if we really were, that means we wouldn't have the natural and human resources to accomplish everything. So you can think of the government's budget as like so many aircraft carriers and bombers and miles of road and schools that are built and everything that's done, right, through government spending. And if we're spending too much, we wouldn't get it done. And you don't ever see at the end of the year this thing in the newspaper that we're 13 schools short in some district because, there's just wasn't enough bricks,
Right.
We all got accomplished pretty easily. And there's this deficit. And I was like, it's artificial, man. I know it's not real because I know all the things I'm working on, they're not really real.
Right.
Apartment buildings we're financing, they're real. These limited partnerships and all that, they're not really real. And you could see apartments going into foreclosure and coming back out, but they're still there. It's like nothing.
They didn't disappear and have to be recreated.
Yeah, I remember
they exist.
In 2008, some of my kids were saying, "Oh my God, Dad, can you believe the real estate crisis? It's like the worst it's ever been." And I said, "Well, first of all, it's not. I've lived through worse." And I said, "It's not really a crisis." And I go, "Why? How can you say that?" I go, "Look outside. You see the houses out there? No, it's a crisis when you look out and half of them are gone. Now we have a real estate crisis." So I just there's got to be a solution because it's synthetic what we created. And if there's a synthetic deficit, we can recreate it so it's not there.
Yes. So how do we do that?
Well, oh my God, I go to Wall Street and talk to people about that. And they thought I was some, radical. They'd like, "Oh, you're some leftist." And I'm like, "No." And they go, "Oh, you're a far rightist." "No." "Are you a communist?" "No."
I'm a man with an idea.
I go, "No, it's just, I just know this is artificial." So the answer actually turns out to be very, very simple. Even though it's a radical change, it would be transformative, it'd be disruptive. We're just taxing the wrong thing when we tax income. Now, all you have to do is look through the history of any nation, through the history of our nation, and you find we tax different things as the economy changes. We've done that for over 200 years. In 1900, we taxed alcohol and tobacco, and that's where 85% of the federal revenue came from. So if we hadn't changed from that, Like, people would be saying, oh my God, there's a deficit when people aren't drinking enough. What is like, where would you peg the blame on that? It's like you're taxing the wrong thing, idiots, And so when we started taxing income, it was the 900-pound gorilla, but the monetary economy is growing much faster than material. So finally, the data came out. I was finally able to find it. That was a huge search. It's publicly available, but you could go to almost any economist or any politician and ask them for the figures I'm going to throw out to you, and they won't know them. It's just not in mainstream out there. We tax income, and there's $21 trillion in income. So Social Security taxes come out of that, payroll income taxes, even sales taxes, even property taxes come out of our income, by the way.
Right.
You don't squeeze it out of the house, And so you got this $21 trillion pot that you're taxing to pay for about $8.5 trillion of spending. That's federal, state, local, everything. Meanwhile, there's $7,625 trillion in money changing hands in the monetary economy every year, just payments moving through. Out of the 7,625 trillion, 21 is our income. The rest is other things. And so if you shave a quarter of a point, 1/4 of 1% off of every payment, we wouldn't have to pay income taxes anymore at all. We wouldn't have to pay sales taxes or property taxes, no taxes. So in other words, if you're earning 100 grand, today you're paying 30 or 40,000 in taxes. And with a payment tax, your 100 grand would be $100,000 of payments. You'd pay $250 on that. So your taxes go from 30,000 to 250, and yet we collect three to four times as much. We would collect enough money that there would not be a deficit. There'd be a $1.9 trillion surplus at a quarter point. And we'd be paying basic income of $24,000 for every adult citizen. When you hit 70, it would go to 30,000. You could pay for free healthcare for everybody under the current healthcare system, not bringing any efficiency in it. You could pay for free college for everybody. You could have earned income credits for people to go to work and get credits. You could even provide daycare for people who are working. All of that, everything I described fits in at a quarter of a point with almost $2 trillion surplus. So that's the thing I think about politics is there's no truth to the concept that there's liberals or conservatives. Because is the idea of a payment tax a liberal or a conservative thing? It's not.
It's not.
It's just like, who of us doesn't want the basic income? Raise your hand. No one. Who of us doesn't want our taxes to go that low? No one. Who of us wouldn't like free healthcare if it weren't killing you in the pocket? No one. I mean, it's like, who wins? We all do. And we all won when we got jet planes. We all won when the internet came along. Nobody's moping over the fact that they don't have to go coast to coast in a horse and carriage. It's like, that's progress.
So it is. And right, the math is simple. I mean, you just walked us through it very succinctly, and it makes absolute perfect sense, right? This is basic math. There's no algorithm required to make sense of it, right? It's the math we learned in high school at its simplest form. And yet you've spent 25 years and somebody hasn't said, hey, Scott, let's do it. Mm-hmm. What are the actual real roadblocks to making a change of this sort?
So I didn't really get the solution properly encapsulated until the last few years. And so now going forward, it's one, I'm not known. I could have a conversation with 10,000 different individuals and they could all agree, and it wouldn't be on CNN or Fox, So the idea has to get thrust into mainstream. And if it's not like people won't be interested in it. If I started getting interviewed on those major networks, people are not going to get bored. They're going to be really saying, wait, is this guy a nut or can we do this? So it's getting to the stage that the idea is out there in front of mainstream America. And you'll have all the pundits coming in. We'll have people asking questions about it. But I think it's so simple that it is the type of thing that it'll garner support.
Interesting. So what do you think the real resistance to it is going to be? I mean, as you think through different lobbying groups, if you think through political parties.
So I've met with all the appropriate people from Wall Street, hedge funds, and nobody comes back and says, oh man, we'd be screwed by this. They're all like, this works. I'd endorse it. I've met with, several billionaires, and they're like, this would work. Now, arguably, it is the wealthiest people who own the financial assets that are being traded.
Yep.
You would think that they might object to it. So several years ago, I began meeting with people like that, and they don't. And because they agree with my assessment, which is even though that money is being pulled out of those trades, because it's being pushed back into the material economy, the value of the financial assets are going to really go up much higher. There's a multiplier effect between the real world and the financial world. So if you take $1 trillion out of the monetary and put it into the real economy, you gain 25 to 100 trillion in value in financial assets, And so the value gain is greater than the tax coming out. So you don't have a loser there.
So, and with that, right, we're putting money into the material economy. So quality of life for Americans improves.
Yeah, our biggest risk on it is, will it be inflationary? And all that means is, can we manufacture the additional goods and services to meet the additional demand that will come out of people having more money in their pockets? And I mean, the vast majority of factories are not operating at 100% capacity. Most businesses are not saying, I have too many customers. We see it occurring from time to time with labor shortages in restaurants and stuff, and it kind of shocks us. But we get that figured out pretty quickly, And its main thing is got to stand out of the way of the additional production. You don't want to have a lot of red tape and overhead that slows. The main reason real estate prices are going up as fast as they are is because our nation is around 25 million housing units short. And there have been some economists I followed that show that the amount of regulatory pressure against the new houses is what keeps those houses from being built and the prices go up. So I do think that you need to make sure you have the freedom for the machine to grow at the rate it needs to. But at the same time, I'm not like an anti-regulatory type of a person because, I've got a lot of friends, and I won't name the big banks, but they're in them, and sitting around over lunch, they've said to me, as well as I do, that if you don't, keep the regulations tight, they get greedy and go right through the roof. So we have to be
absolutely
in what our government regulates. That's what we have to do.
So, Scott, I so appreciate you taking us through that explanation of, a tax model that reduces the amount of money coming out of our individual pockets and puts so much more back into the material economy.
Mm-hmm.
This is what you wrote your book about, A Tale of Two Economies. Where is that book available?
It's on Amazon. You can put A Tale of Two Economies and Scott Smith, and you'll find it. You can go to, I think you have the Foundation for a Better Economy.org. It'll be on your show notes. So you can click to that. That website explains everything without you having to read the book. But if you want to buy the book, it's on the website. You just click buy. And so,
fantastic.
Yeah, it's easy to analyze this. I think the key will be hitting a critical mass. So if somebody's watching this and they're saying, I wish it would happen, but it never will, make sure you're not the block. Share it with everyone you know. If you shared it with everyone you know and everybody does it and it doesn't happen, then maybe I was wrong.
Absolutely. Scott, at the end of my conversations, I like to throw out a final question. It is a somewhat random question. It's not the same question for every guest, but for you today, I would love to know, what's the best piece of advice you ever received?
Well, I'm not dead yet. So.
To date.
Oh, yeah. Can I get back to you on that?
Oh my goodness. Of course you can get back to me on that. I'm curious though, is there that one piece of advice that somebody gave you that you didn't listen to that you wish you should have, should have?
Like if you're talking about finances, personal finances, the best piece of advice I've heard came from my grandfather. And he just said, don't wait till you're making more or less. Just always take 10% of what you make and just invest it. And he says, and don't worry about what you invested in. Invested just in the S&P 500. Don't like pick your stocks. And then once you did it, don't ever sell it. Wait until you're about 65 or 70, and then you see where you are. And if you put it in if you're making enough to buy real estate and rent it out, do that and buy stocks and put 10% away, which I'm not saying is easy. But if you do that throughout your life, you're going to do fine.
And it is a simple piece of advice that many grandparents have shared with all of us over our lifetimes. And those who have, actioned on it know the value of that 10% over a working lifetime. Thank you so much for the conversation. Thank you for taking us through an approach on taxes that will eventually change the way that we live in the United States and the quality of life and what we afford back to our people through the tax process. I love everything that you're talking about. And that's why I'm here shouting from the rooftops to give you something to elevate the conversation.
You're doing a lot for this. That's good. Thank you.
I love it. So that's it for us today, folks. I hope you enjoyed the show. The content that we're talking about, all of the links will be in the show notes. And don't get left behind. Join me next time.
That's it for today's episode of Disrupt and Innovate. Head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Every single week, one lucky listener that posts a review on iTunes will win the grand prize drawing, a $15,000 private VIP day with Lisa Levy. And be sure to head over to disruptandinnovate.com and get your free copy of Lisa's gift. And join us on our next episode.